This is part 2 in a series of the panoramic van build. There'll be a card in the upper right hand corner. You can click on it. That'll take you back to part 1. And in this episode, we're going to go over designing the kitchen, the placement of the components, and where the electricals are going to go in. The pieces are starting to come in as the paint dries, so let's get going. The time has come to start putting in some components, fitting them in, see where they're going to go. And if you remember, I was complaining a bit about these brackets and how I was going to have to bring this out a little bit more. Wow, talk about Providence. It worked out perfect. If that had been 1 inch narrower, I would have not been able to fit both of my batteries in there. These are 100 amp hour batteries. So I have one up front here and one in the back, which means I should be able to get all my electronics, my inverter, fuse panel, all that stuff should all go in here, and this I won't need to get in here very often. So let's go over this left side. This is the location, the propane tank, and I know people out there and say it needs to be vented. I'll work on that. But here's the problem. Since I want everything low, that top sticks out even when you take into account the piece of plywood that's going to go here. It's still probably going to catch when you slide the bed. So the solution is probably going to be to shim this up just a little bit. So what we need to do is cut a hole in this lid. So when the lid's down, you'll have this opening, which is fine because then it's easy access to turn on and off the gas tank when you're not using it. When it comes to freshwater tanks, I like these. I've used this and I'm happy. These hold about 2 gallons. The reason I like them is you can drag them to wherever you can find water, and they're not too heavy when they're full. And I have room for probably at least 3 of them in here. And that's a good way of knowing if you're taking a shower and it runs out, you've used 2 gallons of water, and that's probably all you should try and use. So I'm happy with that. And this is going to be in the back when you have it pulled forward and you have the bathroom exposed. Now, somebody commented about these bolts. Yes, I'm going to have to get these removed. I tried everything to remove them. They won't budge, so I'm going to have to go to a garage and have them take these out. I don't want to drill any additional holes in the van because it just is another opportunity to rust to form, and I want to be able to always convert the van all the way back to original just for resale. Here's a closer look at the battery in the front here. And I'll have a battery disconnect right here in the front where I can easily access that. So I want to talk about the paint I use. I want something extremely durable because we're going to have a shower with water and cooking and all that. So I want something that's just rock hard. So this is Rust-Oleum paint. It is oil based. It's not very fun to work with, but it is so durable. This is gloss. It's okay for exterior. It's waterproof, and it takes a lot of coats. And so I've been spending 3 days painting and sanding. And it's not perfect sanding. You can see the grit, but that's okay. But I also needed a very smooth surface for sliding the bed back and forth. So I've used this before. I've painted every wood surface I could get to except this because it needs to slide, and in hopes that we won't have any wood absorbing moisture. I'm sure many of you are wondering about cooking because we're wanting to keep this panoramic and nothing above the windows. So everything's going to have to stay down low. So one reason I'm not doing wood floors for several reasons. One, the expense and trouble of pulling up this carpet. I'll put another layer of carpet on this. And since my kitchen and all this is going to be low, you're going to spend time on your knees and sitting on the floor. So it needs to be comfortable. So wood floors are kind of out, and it just makes the whole job a lot easier. I have room for the microwave. It's going to be recessed right in here. And fortunately, there was a nice piece of crossbar here to set it on, but I'll need to put in another piece. I'll need to secure it down. Now, you could mount it to where it sticks out, where the door sticks out, and that's fine. But I'm going to flush mount it, which means I'll need to leave a gap here for when the door swings open. But I'd rather have that and save that space so that the microwave only sticks out just a tiny bit. So now, let's talk about if you want to cook with gas. So if you've watched my video on tiny cooking, you've seen this cool little gas burner. Now you can flip the top up and you can convert this area to whatever space you want to make out of it. You could make a sink, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. With this little cool stove, and I'll put the link below, is by Camp Lux. It's a very small, it's an infrared burner, which I really like. And it fits right on here on the metal. You could also put a bigger piece of metal or cookie sheet or something to make this area bigger. And if you needed to cook inside, that's certainly a possibility. But I have another way that I like to do it that works well. This is the way I like to do it. Outside, we keep all the smells and steam and water outside. And again, I've used this many times, and this has the same paint on it. I found it very durable for cleanup and heat tolerant since it's a Rust-Oleum exterior product. But you can see that fits quite well. Now, how it's attached is I've got 3 little angle brackets, and I'll show you where that attaches to. I just made this prop, and there's nothing holding it together. It sits in this little pocket that came with the van. And then I've got 2 bungees here, and the purpose of that is to secure it from being bumped like this. If somebody walked by and bump it, it'll rattle the pot, but it won't flip off. So I'll show you how I made that. So when I take it apart, these little things come off, and it just goes in this little slot here where they've added that on. Try not to put any screws into the van as best as possible, so tuck wherever I can. So this top, we'll flip it over. This is just a piece of Luan with 2x2s that go around it. Left a little room here for that gap here for that trim piece. Then this just lays in here like that. And then the bungees, I have one screwed here, and this bungee attaches over here. And then I have this bungee which attaches over here, and then that holds it in place. And then this can be stored when the door's closed. I can store it right here, or it looks like I might have room to put it somewhat, well, I guess not. So I have room, I can store it here when the door's closed. I've been putting it down here and then bungeeing it to the door, and it doesn't look too bad there. Nice and secure, using a space that you really don't use when the door's closed. Just be careful when you open the door. Many of you will, I'm sure, disagree with me, but I am not a fan of a drain sink. And I've watched a lot of videos, and people have built them out, and then they've complained if you put the tank inside, that water that comes out of this thing has food and bacteria, and it starts to grow and starts stinking. You have to pull the thing out, dump it somewhere, clean it, sanitize it. If you put the tank underneath, then you have to keep it heated in the winter. So I'm not a big fan of having that tank. It takes up space, it's work, it's extra plumbing. But I do think there is a purpose for a sink. So part of, if you've watched my video on the pressurized water system, I'll be reusing that system, and we'll have a sprayer, and this is going to be my sink, no drain. So what you want to do is when you're cleaning dishes or using this, just be somewhere, and it's quite a large one, just be somewhere where you can dump this outside into the nature and use products that are okay for being dumped in nature, biodegradable products like that. There's plenty of them out there. And so that's how, I'm not sure where the sink will go, but I'll have the sink when I need it. But this saves so much complexity of plumbing, expense, and space by doing it this way. Here are the 2 big bed pieces that are drying. You remember this one from part 1. This is the part that flips up and makes the barrier and creates the bathroom. And then this is the bigger bed piece, and it is a big piece of wood, and they're in here drying. Now I've used 3/4 inch plywood, and people would probably say that's overkill, but there's a reason that I did that. The bathroom span is going to be quite wide, so I need something that doesn't need a support to cross the whole van. What I did is I went to Lowe's and I put the cart in the aisle, and I took each sheet of plywood out, pulled it out, left the edge on the pile and the other edge on the cart, and I put my full weight on it to see if it would bend. And I checked out all the big pieces, and the smallest that I found that wouldn't budge, wouldn't bend when I put my full weight on it was the 3/4 inch. It's heavy, it's beefy, but what I've learned is just, overbuild it a bit, and at least you don't have to go back and remake it. So this ends part 2. So I hope you come back and check out how things are going in part 3, and we'll start putting this bed together.